Nobody says URL these days. Why you make it so big? You know I type all that text. Just how how I should get down to 8% body fat as a meme. I was in that neighborhood at one point for a few years. I was pretty ripped and pretty lean. But I do not work out that much anymore. How do we just what's the font? Like, why is the font size not a property here? Like, they just okay. So you have to say select font to change the size. And then you have to guess at what's the right size because okay, that's not the right size. That's not the right. Who made this interface, dude? Like, what? This is not the size that you're drawing it. Or maybe it is. Maybe it would. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is. Okay. Why can't I just click on the color to select? Like, what? Who who is responsible for the okay, just don't update it live. That's fine. Don't worry about it. That's a little too dark because I can't tell because you're not updating it. Like, have these people never played a video game in their life? Okay, maybe that's fine. That's unreadable. Unreadable. How do we put a background? Background color. Select color. Pretty dark, but not totally dark. How do I pick the alpha for the background color? Ah, here it is. Oh, it's updating this live. It just. Okay, this is totally wrong, by the way. How is that 50% opacity? It's just like not. It's like not gamma correct or something. All right. I'm going to stop complaining. We expect these things. We expect these things when using systems made by normies. All right. Let us put the link in chat. Here is the link. Like everyone tells me open source software, and then you use it and like everything about it, like things that would be so easy to get right are just, I mean, at least it functions unlike a lot of Linux user space, but still, it could be so much better than it is. I'm using a fairly old version of OBS. Yeah, because it used to bother me to update all the time every time I started it, and the updates were never anything I noticed or cared about. And so I stopped, just like any normal person. We're not going to try upgrading it while we're on a stream. Probably could have gotten the course done sooner if not how bad Google Slides is. So one time, this talk is actually on YouTube. One time I was in the Netherlands, and I was giving a talk at a little university, game small festival, and I decided that I was going to use Open Office because Microsoft Office had pissed me off so much. I decided I was going to use Open Office to make my slides. And I always make my slides like 24 to 36 hours before. Uh, Maybe not the best way to put the max amount of effort into a talk, but it's a way of compartmentalizing the effort so that I'm working on games most of the time, right? And I go to the hotel and I'm working on the talk, and Open Office is crashing fucking constantly. Like after 8 hours, it's like I kind of have some text on some slide. It was horrific. The talk was way worse than it would have been. I was incredibly aggravated and angry. I didn't get to sleep much. That was the genesis of me making the slideshow program that some people may have seen. Like, we're not even talking about Open Office being good or not. It like wouldn't run. Like you would type text into a slide and it would crash. Like I wasn't even doing anything crazy. Let me change the font size. Crash. Right? It's so stupid. Open source software. Is it possible to build software that will never need updates? Well, most games don't tend to need updates, especially if they fix a few bugs after launch. Like there are plenty of games you can play on Steam that are really fun, that work well, and haven't been updated in 10 or 15 years. So yes, obviously you can make software that doesn't need updates. Is there a way, can we like pin the link in Twitch chat? So I think I'm going to like open the stream in YouTube, but we're going to have the volume off or something cuz I want to encourage people to watch the actual thing. So we could do this. We could have it kind of small on the screen so that people know what we're talking about. Um, and then maybe I'll make myself all big like a Twitch streamer star, and I'll make some golden monkey tea, and we'll just have random technical crap in the background. We could run my game in the background, right? And then that could be a fun way for me to burn CPU cycles locally. What's a good level? We could put a screenshot Saturday in the back. That's a good looking level, right? We could have that. And then we could have this besmirching our beautiful art. And then when this starts, we could have some compiler. Whoops. Dude, it's on the D. I gotta get a new machine just so I can get rid of my D drive. It's so why is Windows so broken, dude? Dude, my brain, I need some tea. All right, there we go. We compiled something, and that can also be some technical background here somewhere. I don't know. How many times can we recompile the game? A lot. The answer is a lot. I can pin and the link. Okay, let's try that. Let's try that. Pin So I was gonna I was gonna think about streaming on Twitch also or Twitter also, but I just don't want to figure it out right now. It was a pain in the ass last time. And I mean, feature development on Twitter does not seem very rapid at this point. You know what I'm talking about? It's better than Twitter One. Yes, it is. Casey was multi-streaming, not sure on Twitter, but on YouTube. Yeah, we literally never live stream to YouTube, so I didn't want to figure that out right now. But Twitch, talk about stagnant. Twitch is just incredibly stagnant. They keep adding dumb crap. So now you can't even watch a streamer full screen on Twitch anymore without little notifications for babies popping up. Like when somebody gifts subs, it pops up in a window in the corner of the screen and you have to manually close it every time. Like you can't just watch the stream. It's very anti-viewer. You don't understand Twitch, their employee count is 1,000, but that's normal for all these companies. The reason it's only 1,000 is because Twitch doesn't make more money than that. If Twitch made more money, they would have 5,000 employees with the same functionality, right? There's a setting to make it automatic. I looked for it for 5 minutes. I could not figure it out and I gave up. It's incredibly viewer hostile. And this whole like there's a setting is like it's the modern excuse for just constant idiocy, right? Yeah, I want to go to college for 4 years to become a setting scientist just to make everything reasonable. All right, I'm going to start some tea. Back in a minute. Mr. Streamer, don't you know there's a setting to make it only 70% crappy instead of 100% crappy? And it'll get reset randomly later on. Golden monkey tea. The best. The best tea. We're just waiting for the water to boil. We've got some honey. I need to use up all this honey so that I can use this. This is the perfect size jar for the MSG that I bought from Amazon. So actually, let me see. It's actually not bad. I put it in this old barrel ginger chai mason jar, and it's a little too big for it, but it's of the right size. It's just once this goes down a little bit, maybe we put it in the honey. Where do I buy my golden monkey tea? So I'm spacing on the name of the let me get a package. So my current place to get good golden monkey tea that I really enjoy is this place, the Whistling Kettle, which is like a tea place in upstate New York. However, this is not a general recommendation. I like their golden monkey a lot, but I got some other teas because I was like, wow, the golden monkey's so good. Let me try some other stuff. And the one other tea that I tried, which was a different black tea, was just like dry and nasty. So I don't know. Jury's out on Whistling Kettle as a whole, but the golden monkey that I got was good. And I've gotten multiple batches of it. Premiere's in 5 minutes, so we got to get ready. And sadly, we don't have good milk because we're buying like local milk. It doesn't have 10 trillion poisons in it that make it last for 2 months. Ooh. Back in a sec. Had to go rinse the tea. You're supposed to do that with certain teas. I don't know. Maybe it's not necessary for this, but yeah. Look how good that looks. Could generate random numbers from that right there. I gotta get a thing to drink it from. I don't have a cup. Everything else, no cup. No cup. Okay, guys. So here's the thing. I want people to watch this on the actual YouTube stream. So I'm going to be watching it here. So we will also show the picture for people who are curious, but we're not going to have desktop audio. Okay. So you're not going to hear what he's saying unless you open the link yourself. Like RiffTrax. Yes, we'll say stuff like, oh man, I forget. I never watched RiffTrax, but I watched lots of Mystery Science Theater. I don't remember any of the catchphrases. That's how long it's been. Audio won't sync. Well, you're supposed to watch it on your own screen. Okay. We're just going to be hanging out and chatting and stuff. And I don't even know. I'm doing this as a way to encourage people to look at interesting game design material. I don't think I'm going to act as like a critic of it. So I don't honestly know what I'm going to say. We'll see. Maybe I'll say some stuff related to the thing. Maybe we'll talk about Arc Raiders. Have I already watched? No, I don't. I have no idea what's in this. This could be porn for all I know. Oh, wait, this won't work. Okay, I got to do it. I got to see if we don't. Well, actually, no, it should be fine. All right. Premiere will begin shortly. Could be an experts exchange. I hope not. I hope it is not that. Double right click on the video once it begins and you can pop it out and drag it over the stream. Does that? I guess once it begins is the trick. But yes, you guys could do that. Hey, look, there's chat. There's YouTube chat. There's Twitch. It's like we're in the cyberpunk future where there's different chats happening simultaneously. All right. Go to the link. Go to the YouTube link. Guys, my computer is not responding to input. I did something. I alt tabbed to the game and tried to do something. And like seriously, I'm control alt deleting and nothing is happening. There's a setting to fix that. Okay. I'm going to restart the stream because I have to fucking reboot my computer. All right, I'll be back. Please watch the video while I go. Back in a second. Okay, wait. Wait. I hit the power button on the PC and that worked. Oh yeah, maybe my keyboard stopped working, but it's plugged in. Okay, I unplugged it and replugged it. There was some kind of USB problem. Good talk. Good talk. Yes, you can hear me when I decide to Statler and Waldorf the situation. You're on mobile. Sucks to be you. That's a hard question. I don't get ideas for food to cook. I think demakes are dangerous. We could talk about why after if anyone wants to ask. I don't want to talk over him too much, but demakes are dangerous. I'm going to take notes about things to talk about at the end, and then we can chat about the notes. Oh my God, it's not resizing the window. Am I muted? No, I'm just not talking over the video that much. I might talk over the video once in a while. Spoilers! You can't really see that wall in that Steven Sausage Roll graphics. Uh, oh. Tetris. They're not Tetris. We must not get sued. Also, Tetris means like four. Five-piece tetromino. Magnets, how do they work? You were going to play The Witness tomorrow. Listen, after 10 years, spoilers are valid. If a game is 10 years old, people get to say any spoiler they want. Eris gets killed. Do I know anyone who completed the witness ending but didn't find out the secret? I think that's not uncommon, actually. This is a really difficult example because he's not explaining what is the shape constraint there. And because I played the game, I know, but someone watching this doesn't necessarily understand those pictures. Like, why are those that shape? You know? Maybe not the best name. It actually makes sense when you talk about conveyance first, which of course we're not here. But yeah, it's a complicated name. Yeah, this is actually a really important section. It may just sound like details of what I did in my game that doesn't apply to you, but um actually this is exactly the thing that a lot of people don't do enough of. Like they'll start with their initial idea and there'll be some things that suck about the initial idea and they'll just sort of put up with the things that suck. So like this is a really good example of if you can figure out how to generalize it, it's a really good example of how to make a game good, actually. In retrospect, it always seems obvious. Yeah. One of the things about the current Sokoban game is there were just lots and lots and lots of problems like this that we had to solve. And most of them you'll never figure out what it was that we didn't understand how to do because we just solved the problem well enough that you don't see that it's a problem. But because the game is so big and complicated, there was a huge stack of problems. And that's what most people do. No, 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 no. Don't delay your Q&A. Just do your Q&A. We'll talk after the Q&A. Just do your Q&A. I don't want to interfere with the thing. We could even talk about this some other time if we're tired after the Q&A. This is just my thoughts of what's interesting to talk about after the video. Why not do a joint panel? I don't know. It, the thing is, we'll talk about it after. We'll put that on the list. This is very important. Half the indie games of 2010 were this. Mm, I think that's a partial definition. I never played this. I didn't even know it existed, actually. And Snakebird's already annoying, by the way. Does the cube not go into the pit? What is... Oh God, yeah. That's annoying. Oh God. I mean, this is basically Monument Valley, right? So the question is, do they do anything better than Monument Valley? Or more original or different? This is all true. It goes in a different, much more systemic direction. Interesting. Okay. Okay, cool. Is it ever worth getting playtests from people you know may not like your game? Probably not. Just don't worry about that because it's hard enough to make your game good enough for people who might like it. Like, why make it even harder than it is? We did leak a YouTube link at one point. I need more sleep. I only got 7 hours. I can nap during Q&A. This is true. Just don't overreact to a playtest, right? I'm out of tea, sadly. This gets really hard when your game's really big, by the way. It's a lot harder. I'm gonna disappear for a second and boil some more water. I'm I'm not ignoring the talk. I'm just taking care of my caffeine needs. Back in a second. Hey, we're back. Is Factorio a puzzle game? Kind of. Kind of. Terrible audio. Maybe I should have explained that more in the original talk, looking back in retrospect. I never heard of this game. What's this called? Pseudo Regalia? Does anyone know what game this is? You want to type the name of it? We could try it out sometime. Pseudo Regalia. Is it on Steam? Furry game. Oh no. Oh no, furries. Furry phobia mode. That's a good idea. Same shirt. Not really, but now you should put more bassy audio on the other one. Yep. 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 I never played this either. That sounds weird. Like every game has pushing boxes, right? Or just under underestimating the player, right? Yeah, also very good advice. Yeah, the beginning of Outer Wilds kind of sucks. If I enable subtitles, how about if you just click on the YouTube link and watch it? You don't have to watch this. You could just watch the video if you're on mobile. I haven't heard of this game either. Wait, it says I have this. Did I just play this and bounce off it immediately? Or did I just never play it? Did we play this? I guess we forgot about it. Good advice. $15-minute delay before properly answering. Am I going to do my homework? I have so much homework. Okay, I don't need to watch that. Like and subscribe. Okay, I guess he said there's going to be a delay. I guess the Q&A is a different video, right? Because this was a pre-uploaded thing. Here's a link to the Q&A stream. It's just, oh, it's Twitch. Okay. So we'll just see when this goes live. Okay. So, I mean, again, I don't want to do any kind of like, you know, commentary on the thing that we just saw, because the internet has too much of that anyway, and it's not necessary, right? You get to think what you think about everything. Also, it would be weird for me to have commentary about it, because a lot of it um is referring to stuff that I said and whatever. So that also just becomes too far up your own butt at some point. Let's turn off the little text. Okay, so but we got some ideas of things to talk about that are these are just my own thoughts on related stuff. Um, so one is demakes. You know, he suggested that as a way. You know, again, to paraphrase, I think he was saying, if you're getting into game design and you don't exactly have ideas, demakes is one way to do it. It's true, because demakes are very accessible. Wait, did this go live? Okay. Okay. We'll hang out here. Be sure to go to this channel and like and subscribe. Oh wait, it's my channel on this channel. Oh no. Okay. Anyway, so the danger of demakes is the following. Um well, okay, the good thing, let's talk about why demakes are good, is because it provides idea fuel, right? It gives you something to do without having to like have some rocket sciencey like amazing idea. It's like, oh, I like this game. I've seen other demakes. They have like pixel art and whatever, and I feel like it would be cool to do that, and that's all true, and they can be good. Just doing a demake can be good either design practice or programming practice or whatever you want it to be, right? The danger, on the other hand, is that like at some point, if you don't find a little bit of magic sauce, if you don't find the reason why that demake of that game is good, then your demake is essentially kind of the same game as every other demake, right? And unless you find a way for the reduced fidelity and the simplicity of whatever to highlight something about the game, or to bring a new idea in, or something like that, right? Um, so this is the thing. Okay, what is a demake, right? Usually it has worse graphics, and usually it has, um, well, let's just say overall a lesser technical implementation, and then also a simplified version of the design. You're not implementing the full game; you're implementing something about it, usually, right? And not always, general rule. But the thing about that is, by not implementing the full design of the game, it does give you the ability to focus on some part of the game and then take it in a slightly different direction. And that could be a really fruitful way to think about things. But the danger is, if you just think that like, oh, I'm going to make a demake of this game and it's just got worse graphics and therefore it's better because it's mine. That doesn't quite work, right? And so you've just got to make sure to use that opportunity to turn on your creative brain and like have a little bit of a spark, right? That's all. Um, okay. But sometimes, you know, I mean, again, so what are examples of the opportunities? Well, sometimes games are way too encumbered, for example, right? And when you do the demake, you could either copy the encumbrance, right, unthinkingly, or you could be like, look, this is supposed to be a lighter, fresher version of this game. Let's figure out how to do that, right? So I have never made a demake. I'll say that. Um, Part of that is just because I'm so busy just trying to make other things. But when I play demakes, some of them are really cool and fun, and some of them are just like, there's no point to this, right? Um, one of the topics that came up was this labor intensive, like he was talking about like core game mechanic, like when you're deciding what your game is about. And it's very helpful if you make it about something that's easy to add to and expand on until you find your game. And that's very good advice. And then he brought up so The Witness is an example of a game that's a little more labor intensive in that the labor intensive part he was saying in the beginning is another way of saying some of the stuff he was saying later on in the talk about um, is something interesting enough on its own, or does it require additional work to be done in order to make it interesting, right? And that's another way of saying labor intensive is like to get to the good part, you're going to have to implement more mechanics and more programming and all that. And the thing about point number two here is this really is a beginner versus experienced designer thing. I think if you're a beginner, you want to stay on this end of the spectrum, right? For sure. And then like after you've done at least some simple games, you could start thinking about this, right? But again, as I always say, the thing you got to keep in mind about games is they're way, way more work than you think if you've never made one. And so you don't want to have an idea that's labor intensive because it puts more stress on that main pain point, right? Of like, it's just so much work. Um, and in fact, when I design games, I mean, this is hard because I have to talk about a game prototype that you haven't played. Like 15 people in the world have played it. It was something. We'll do it after Order of the Sinking Star, so you'll see it eventually. But when I was doing design for that game, I was very, very, very cautious on erring on this side of things. I think in part because I was just tired from working on The Witness and it took forever. Um, and now I look back at some of the decisions I made there, and I was like, no, we could go on this side, and it would make the game better. So, okay, the thing about doing things that are labor intensive is because it's harder. A lot of people will shy away from that, and so if you go into that territory, you're going somewhere that other people aren't naturally going to go, right? And it just lets you more easily go into territory that other people aren't entering, right? Um, okay, contrivance. Contrivance is really, it's actually kind of a subtle point, and I feel like you could do a whole lecture on what it means. Like I have a lot of thoughts about this that I didn't have back then. Um, the way that contrivance is most visible is just when, like, let's say a game says there's a lot of rules you have to follow right now in order to like play this level or whatever, and it's hard for your brain to keep track of all the rules, and you're like, what's the point of these rules and whatever. That's an extreme case, right? But as you said in the talk, every game had like a game is contrivance, right? Without contrivance, you don't have anything because the system of rules that's running on the computer is contrivance, right? And so every rule that you add to that rule set is like some amount of weight that you're adding to the machinery. And it's just what you get in response for adding that weight to the system should be more than the weight, right? And so it should benefit you more than you spent or more than you're making this is important. Not just more than you spent as a designer, but more than you're making the player spend to play the game. Because to understand and comply with all these rules in complicated situations, and or even if you just drop them into a level with really complicated geometry, they have to like work, right? And so you just want to have an eye on that. Okay, the minimum here, even if you don't have brilliant solutions to anything like this, if as a designer you just notice when you're doing contrivance and how much you're doing, that's the first step, right? And then from there, you can just be like, do I really need to do this thing? Can I simplify the geometry of this level and so forth? I mean, so these days I sort of think of it as, uh, you know, I mean, this is a nerdy version of the metaphor, but like as a rocket kind of metaphor, right? Like if you if you put too much material into the shell of the rocket because you think that makes it stronger and stuff, it's not going to take off no matter how much like fuel you put in and all that, right? You want the rocket to take off. And so you actually want it to be light. Um, yeah, I don't know. But like I said, this is like a whole, I mean, dude, it's more than a 1 hour talk. You could do 3 or 4 hours just on this. Um, and so this thing about depth being accessible via additions to the rule set, which again, the witness is an example of, um, is a way of managing contrivance by making it modular. Like we have a certain amount of contrivance to get you to a certain place. You get used to those contrivances, right? And then they don't feel like contrivances anymore. Like if you've gotten used to some basics and you've gotten a lot of good, let's say it's a puzzle game, you've gotten a lot of good puzzles out of it. And you as a player feel like, okay, I'm in this system. I like get it. It's a good thing. I'm happy to be playing these things. Um, then when you start adding stuff, you don't really feel the weight of the base anymore because you're so used to it. And then for every little addition that you add, if that also provides a decent amount of benefit, um, it's a way of pacing out contrivance, right? Um, I feel bad if he's delaying the Q&A. Okay, we got 6 minutes to cover all these points. The dice pip thing, I definitely thought about stuff like that in the witness, right? Like when I'm sitting around thinking about, in fact, I probably thought about an equivalent to the dice pip mechanic first. And then I ended up turning it into the, let's say the polyomino mechanic, right? And why did I do that? One was just, I didn't want the game to feel super mathy and be about counting all the time. And I just like, while I'm adding mechanics, I'm thinking about the quality of thought of it is to solve these puzzles, and like moving shapes around in my mind just felt, um, it felt more intuitive in a way, right? Because if you're like, oh, I've got this little L-shaped, Tetris piece. Of course, we're talking about the Tetris from Escape from Tarkov, not anything that would violate a trademark. Um, like if you're thinking about moving a piece around, it just goes more into the intuitive sector of your brain. And the witness is trying to live in that more intuitive territory much of the time. But then the other reason is just, part of the agenda was to come up with things that interoperate. And then another part of the agenda was to have surprises in the rule set that you only really even see later in the game, right? Like, oh, I thought I understood these polyominoes or the black and white stones or whatever. And then like after 20 hours of gameplay, something comes up and it's like, oh, wait, the rule isn't exactly what I thought it was, even though I thought I understood it exactly. And that's harder to do. I'm going to say something that's difficult to justify and might take a lot of explanation to justify that we're not going to do, but it's harder to do with a simpler, more orthogonal mechanic to hide things, right? Like if you hide something with dice pip mechanic, it's more like, well, we actually added something later, you know? Um, whereas because we have the shapes, um, well, I don't know, maybe that's not the best example, but I was definitely in the neighborhood of thinking about tying things together and not exactly making them totally orthogonal. Well, okay, we can go to the mathematic metaphor. Actually, when things are perfectly orthogonal, they actually don't affect each other. You just add them together to make vectors out in the space, right? But when they have some non-orthogonality, um, they can interfere with each other in interesting ways, a little more. It's hard to talk about that without examples. I don't know if we talked about that in the 2011 talk because it's been so long, or whether we just advocated like pure orthogonality. But what I would say is that if you're a beginning designer, pure orthogonality is a very good thing to strive for because it'll just make you good at design. And usually orthogonality is simpler, and usually designs need to be simpler and clearer to the player. And it'll help you search the possibility space of your game if you have somewhat orthogonal mechanics. However, there actually is a decent amount of juice in non-orthogonality when used intentionally. And so maybe the right thing as a designer is to strip down to orthogonality and then add things back if you need some more juice or something like that. Um, this whole inverse conveyance thing, I actually forgot that I ever said that. It's totally true. Um, I think this is more of a beginner to intermediate designer thing. Like once you've done enough game design, you sort of just call yourself on your own bullshit about whether something's actually working and is there or not. But as a beginner designer, you're just constantly giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. Like I remember doing that all the time, right? And there's, you kind of just have to learn. You need to learn to see. So he talked about prototyping, and yeah, that's the only way I know to test ideas either. And you just need to be able to like really look objectively at your prototype and tell whether it's working, right? And that's just a skill that you get over time. And um, I mean, I don't know. I probably had more to say about that, but I don't remember. Let's pause this discussion because he's going to do the Q&A at the promised time, and we'll see what comes from that. Come on, there's only 173 people. Everyone go over there. We'll restream this because it's Twitch. We'll turn on the volume for this, right? Hopefully that's legal. 173 people. Everyone go over there. We'll restream this because it's Twitch. We'll turn on the volume for this. Okay, now I'm not hearing him. Is he muted? Am I muted?
I'm still muted. I should be
Okay,
unmuted
there
now.
we go.
Apologies that I'm so much louder than John, but this is always the thing on John's streams. Okay, let me set up a thing here so that I have a local recording of everything, which should be all right. Okay. Oops. And we've got part 1 here and bonus stuff if we need any of it. Anyway, so we didn't get a ton of questions. I thought I would start by like kind of addressing, let's say, some of those things that John was talking about. So specifically, I wanted to address the demake thing because as soon as he like wrote that down, I was like, well, it's probably like oversimplifying it to use the word demake. It's just sort of, oh yeah, okay, let me remove that. Oversimplifying to use the word demake because like all I really mean with demake is that like you should scope the thing smaller. Don't think that you're gonna make this huge thing, right? Small scope is really important when you're an indie because you just don't have much budget, you don't have much people to do the thing. So like if the games that you are a big fan of are like, I'm a huge fan of Elden Ring, then it's like, well, you're not going to make a game that's as big as Elden Ring. It's just not going to happen. So especially if you're, well, if you're going to be able to make that, but if you're a beginner, then you should know that it's unlikely.
Don't
But
try to
anyway,
make
that
Elden
was my
Ring
point
as
with
your first
demake.
game.
Not, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very good point to say that you need to like understand how the thing works. I mean, to some extent, there was a part in there that I cut. I don't know that if it's in the bonus slides.
It's a lot of slides.
But there was a part here that I cut. This part that was specifically intended to address this point of like not getting why the thing works. The problem was I didn't have many like examples.
Oh,
I'm not sure why I had
he
this
took my
here.
stats like tweet.
Oh, okay, right. Because there's games that
Uh-oh.
are doing this kind of stuff, or like Pick 3 or whatever. There's just like a lot of games that just do the same thing. They all copy the same design thing, and they're not really even thinking about it. It's like an unthinking thing. So anyway, that's that point, which is not exactly addressing a question, but it was a discussion point there.
Reaction content.
Right. So the
We are
thing
doing
about
reaction
labor intensive
content.
versus what's the word that I used?
Yeah, after this
Well, I
game's
just talked about
done,
like
I need
things
to make a
that
living.
are relatively easy to get new stuff out of versus it's a lot of work for every individual puzzle that you add into the game or every individual mechanic or whatever, right? And the course is just generally
But
targeted
Hassan
at
got
lower
banned, so I
intermediate
won't have
designers
content
because I
anymore.
think if
Or
you're
is
an
he back
upper
already?
intermediate designer, you kind of already know what you're doing and you can probably ignore anything that I say that doesn't apply to you. Um, and I try to, I
He's
try to
still
touch on that a
banned.
little bit because I don't want to come across completely like I'm just saying like this is absolutely the rule of how you should always do things.
But it's probably just
Because
for like a
everything
week
in
or
game
something.
design is like very context dependent. But a lot of the stuff in here is like general rule. It's like the rule of thumb. It's like better than no rule at all. Like it would be better if
Yeah,
people
his audio is
tried
lagging
to
for
pick
me as well.
things that
We could try forcing.
cool stuff is falling out of the system of the game
Yeah.
rather than let's start with this idea that I have and like it's gonna be so cool once I get all the graphics in there or whatever, right? It's like it maybe as a beginner that's not the best idea because maybe it won't be so cool. Like once you're an experienced designer, then you can more imagine like what's actually gonna happen. Okay. Anyway, uh, and then another point was this thing about the dice pips, which I actually knew. I don't think I knew. Oh, the video's lagging. Let me reset the webcam here. Two OBS is happening. Of course, it screwed up the other OBS. But anyway,
That did not
hopefully it's
help at all.
synced now. So I think I knew that at some point that there was like something similar to this dice pip thing in the witness, but I don't think it was part of my consideration exactly for whether I was going to put that in the game, but in Taiji, I mean, but it got worse for you. Well, I've got two OBSs, so do you want to have the stream that you're watching be more synced, or do you want to have the recording continue to get screwed up? I mean, we can try again. I really don't know, but it's probably because I have two OBSs going, and one of them is like doing the stream, and one of them is recording locally.
Computers. Oh, we lost him.
It syncs this time. Is it better now?
Nope.
Seems better on my end.
Nope.
It looks like there's less delay.
He's streaming from the moon.
Just turn it off and back on.
Speed of
again and
light
hope that
is
it
a
gets
problem.
synced. Anyway, so that's like 3 times that I've interrupted this answer or this discussion point. So I want to like, I want to start over from the beginning, which is to say, I kind of knew that that was a thing in the witness, and I kind of knew it didn't work. And the thing is I think part of the reason that that kind of mechanic also doesn't work in the witness is because you have to do all of the counting in your head.
Yeah.
Whereas in
true.
Taiji, when you're doing those puzzles, the counting is actually happening implicitly on the board. You're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you draw the thing, and so you can sort of like finagle that shape. You don't have to do as much counting.
Yes,
With that
true.
said, there still was an intermediate kind of state whilst developing Taiji where there were puzzles that had too much counting and it was too annoying. And so in the final game, there's like relatively few puzzles that are really focused around counting, right? Because that's like an okay flavor, but if it's the only flavor, it gets very fatiguing, which that's something that will get discussed later in the course. But anyway, okay, so I see a couple more questions in chat that I don't have in here, so I'm going to copy them over. And And I will go through, I guess, the questions that I have. If I've missed your question, then feel free to post it again, because there's a lot of stuff going on. So I don't know. Let's see. So, right. Okay. So this is a question, I think, from YouTube. Sun Hunter 27 asked, do I think that adding some telemetry for playtest builds can be a good way to get extra value from a CleanX tester? What areas specifically? Well, CleanX tester is specifically about first impressions, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of value from telemetry on first impressions. Maybe, I mean, maybe you can, but like, um, I've never put telemetry into a build. I just watch people play the game. You know, unless you're making a really huge game, you can probably watch everybody play your game that you have test. So, something I wanted to clarify that I don't say in that video, but somebody wasn't quite sure about, in the pre-screening, but I didn't think it was important enough to like re-edit the video. Is when I talk about rounds of playtesting, what I mean is that as you're working on the game, there's going to be different points where you're like, okay, I have a build that I want people to play and test the game, and so I'm gonna bring on some new testers, right? Like I've made enough changes that I'm gonna bring on new testers, and you know it could be several months that go by, and then you're sort of like bringing on another group of testers. So when I say you like bring on like 3 people, I don't mean you bring on 3 people, period. I mean that you have 3 people, um, and then you'll have another round later where you bring on 3 more people, right? So in each of those rounds, it's like you're watching those people play the game, and 3 people playing your game, even if you have like a 20-hour game, then that's like a decent amount of time, right? It's 60 hours to watch people play the whole game. And so you don't want to bring too many people on because you won't be able to watch that. And since I do think if you can watch everybody play your game that you bring on as a playtester in real time, that will help a lot. I've seen people do the other thing where they bring on, oh, we will bring on 1,000 testers and we'll just have people like write what they think. And I think you actually get very little relative to if you only had a few people and you watched what they did very closely. Um, Audio is lagging. Yes, the audio is lagging. Like 5 people have said that. I don't know what to do about it other than I can not record a full quality thing. If it's tolerable, I would please ask you to tolerate it because this is going to be a short video, and then there will be a edited version of the Q&A that sits around for forever. So I apologize that it's slightly out of sync, but I really don't know how to sync it. So other than sometimes it does that, but I have two I have this OBS and this OBS. There are 2 things going, and both of them are competing for my webcam. So all right. Okay. Let's see. This one is probably not going to go into the archive, but I thought was funny. So Mycon asked, you said the course doesn't apply to games like Monkey Island, but do you even insult Sword Fight Bro? I have, in fact, played both the real Monkey Islands. So I have insult sword fighted. So insult sword fought. Anyway, okay. So Patrick GH3, or it's Patrick of Patrick's Parabox fame, asks, specifically for the early development of Taiji, where you showed the builds, how did you make those push, pivot, punt decisions, and why, and how did they turn out in retrospect? Well, when I said push, pivot, or punt, I mostly mean like you're prototyping a new game idea, and the new prototype either goes well or like some part of it kind of works, but it's not exactly the main idea that you had. That doesn't work for some reason, and so you can like pivot onto that smaller part of the idea that was interesting. Or punt, which is just like, this isn't working, and I'm gonna shelve the prototype and not work on it seriously. That's what I meant there. Now, if you meant within the course of developing Taiji, like how did I make the decisions on certain sub parts of that design? Um, usually I made them really quickly, so there wasn't a lot of like going down a long rabbit hole with a mechanic idea and oh, it's not working. Um, most of the mechanics were like things I tried out on paper, and they were either immediately working or they were immediately not working. And so I often didn't implement anything unless the paper test worked, right? Uh, a big thing I think is like in Taiji, there's the like flower mechanic, I guess, right? It's the symbol sort of looks like a flower, right? That was one that actually got cut from the game for a while and then got added in later because I got a lot better at design. And so I started to think like, I think I can make this work now, right? Because it just wasn't working. It was like every single player that went through that section was like getting through most of the puzzles there and did not understand how the mechanics worked. So that's the closest I can think to like answer that question. If there's a good follow up on that, then feel free to ask it. Let's see. Patrick also asked, specifically for Taiji playtesting, what were some of the biggest, most important insights that you got from the playtesting process, and at what points in development were they? Well, a pretty transformative one, I think, was when Casey Muratori tested the game, and he said that it felt like a game from the 1980s. And that was like the most stark response that I'd gotten of how bad the interface was for the game. Um, and Casey was very much like, "Oh, you should just walk around on all the puzzles like you do on a few of them or whatever, right? And that should just be how you do the puzzles." Now, that's not what I ended up doing, but it was clear that like, okay, there's something wrong with the way that the game feels, and like I covered that in the video a bit, but like the main thing at that point was the modal aspect that you would like go into a mode when you're interacting with the puzzle, and now your normal controls don't work. They do something else, and you have to hit a button to leave that mode. So I gained a lot just by figuring out some way that I could I could keep the game in the same mode all the time. That's just like in interface design, that's sort of a concept, and maybe you never heard of that before, but like modal interface just means that, right? That when you're in this mode, the same input might do a different thing, which is just generally not. It can be very powerful, but it's generally not very user friendly, and so you want to avoid that if possible, I think. Okay. Uh, Next question. This seems like a very general question, but this was general game design, I guess. Although, let's see. Secret Google Spy says indie versus finding work versus finding work in industry, or how do you earn if your first game is probably going to suck? Uh, well, if you've never made a game before, period, then it is true that your first game is probably going to suck. Um,
True.
So I think,
True.
the kind of common advice of you should try to make a lot of little things really quickly when you're beginning is good, because you don't want to be investing a lot of time into a project that might be a bad idea and you are so inexperienced that you don't really know the difference between good ideas and bad ideas. But I don't know, like, there's a certain amount of being world wise that is important in the ideas that you choose to pursue, but I don't think you should really be making your decisions based on whether or not they're going to sell well. Like there's a little bit of that that's okay, right? But too much of that and then you're sort of like stomping out any possibility that you're ever going to do anything interesting because you're just thinking about like the product and how can I like target this product at the right segment or whatever. So like now the question about versus finding work in the industry. Um so I've only, as far as working in the industry, I've only worked for Lunark Studios. Uh Otherwise, I've just worked on my own. So I don't know that I have a huge perspective there because Lunark is also an indie studio. So there are only like 20 people there. So that's still compared to like mainstream AAA game industry or something, that's a pretty small environment. Obviously, you have to like work with people. I think that it's always good to have experience working with other people, so that you know what that's like and you know how to work with other people.
True.
But that will probably come either way, even if you're trying to do indie things, right? Unless you're just doing everything on your own, which is probably inadvisable, but is mostly what I did on Taiji, except for Gregory came in the last 6 months and redid the soundtrack and made it much, much better. Um, anyway, let's see. 5 Jimmy Claptricks, that's an interesting name, asks, is more clarity always better design? The Witness versus Tarkov.
This is one
Well,
of
I
these
haven't played
unanswerable
Tarkov, so I'm not
questions.
exactly sure what you mean there.
What do you like better, ice cream
Maybe you can
or
elaborate on that,
salad?
and I'll come back to it. Um, let's see. So there's some more questions
I
here.
guess
Let me
the answer
copy
is
these
ice
in.
cream. I mean,
I
come
just
on.
have to have these in here because they'll get spliced in later into the video. Let's see. Okay, this is not a question, but I guess it should go in here.
What amount of money would I accept to write an OS full
Sorry.
time? I probably wouldn't because I need to be doing
Doesn't have
games.
Q or a question mark at the end, and so
So the
I
question
kind of
is,
had
can
to
I
get that
effectively
out. All
find
right,
good
let's see.
people to run a
I
side
want to go
team to
ahead
do an
and
OS, and
copy
how
this.
much
We're
would
getting
that
questions
cost?
now that it's
It's
happening.
not a matter of
It's
paying me
finally happening.
personally.
It's finally happening. Okay, let's see. Okay, Robotic Fox. Probably worth talking about the color thing. There were some times you talked about it on stream that were pretty interesting. Like it had a lot of potential, but it just wasn't worth the amount of UI issues to make it work, so it got cut. That is a good question. However, that will be addressed in part 2 of the course, so I don't need to discuss it here. Okay. Jagrif asks, how much of the usability issues with early Taiji versions were you blind to as a designer? Did playtesters complain, or did you just notice that playtesters struggled with it? Playtesters mostly did not complain. If I had listened to playtesters' complaints, then my solution to that problem would have been put the controls on the screen. Because they were like, oh, I guess you told me to read a thing. It has the controls in it, right? Okay, you should probably put the controls on the screen, right?
Yeah, it's up to you as a
There,
designer to come
that's
up
what I
with
said. There was
the
like
good
Casey
idea
was
for
the
how to
big
do it
one who
better.
was like, this game feels, I mean, in the nicest way possible, right? The game felt terrible, right? And that there was no reason for it to feel that way. That he sort of had that perception and was willing to say that. So you'll find that like if something's really bad, oftentimes people don't really want to say that it's bad because they want to be nice. So you do always have to watch out for that. But that's much, much worse if you don't have video, right? Because if you have video, you can see that they're struggling with it at least, right? But some of the obvious things that would have been obvious in a video if there were problems with the controls weren't happening because it wasn't like, oops, I hit the
Are
wrong
those puzzles
button,
still in
right? There
archive
wasn't
builds?
stuff
Yeah,
like
I have that
that.
build
It
somewhere.
was just like, it just doesn't feel good. So I guess I would say I was pretty blind to the issues at that time. Now, for context, the game was kind of not initially planned to be a puzzle game, and so this was sort of like a prototype of some puzzles for this sort of Zelda game that was going to have puzzles in it. And so there's a little bit of thinking about that, like there's going to be this whole game and then there's going to be puzzles, so it's not that weird in that context to be like, oh, you're going to go into a mode. Like if you think of the Zelda games, they often will have something like that where you like go into a mode where you're doing some bespoke interface for a puzzle, and it's not so weird because there's so much other things that go on in the game. It becomes more weird in the context of a game where like the only thing you're doing is walking between puzzles. But it's easy to not reconsider that type of design decision that you make early on. And well, that's the whole reason I bring it up. It's like it's important to constantly be reconsidering, like, is there some way I can like shift the design and keep most of what I have, which was the hard part, right? It's like I don't want to cut things, but solve a lot of these issues, right? If I change the design, maybe all these issues just go away, right? And then I don't have to think like, oh, because that often can be the way that you leap to want to solve a problem, is like, oh, I'll just slap a band-aid fix on it, of like, oh, I'll put the controls on the screen every time you like stand at a puzzle, so people won't forget that they have to press the Z key to go into the puzzle, or they won't forget that they have to press the X key to leave the puzzle, or whatever, right? Oftentimes that can be like the knee-jerk response, and like you think, oh, I've solved the problem, but like you definitely don't want to treat that as the way that you solve all design problems, because then you end up with a game that's got a bunch of band-aid fixes on all the issues, and it just feels weird. Okay. So Wilkie B asks, weird question, but if chess were never invented and were released tomorrow on Steam, how would you market a game like this today? Well, I don't think I know much about marketing games. It's not a course on video game marketing. It's a course on game design. So, um, I don't know. I will say that like one of my potential next projects is a weird chess game. So that could be a very realistic question that I have to think about. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'll just say I don't know and move on from that. Let's see. Okay. I wish there was an easier way to like copy these questions from. Oh, come on.
Just have AI
Twitch chat
transcribe
over
the
here.
questions.
Let me just copy the questions before I answer anything. Okay, so far I haven't had to like really have anything on the screen, so I could have just been webcam, although then maybe me being desynced would even be more annoying. Uh, but you know, maybe it's good if I have the question that I'm on highlight for the stream. Let's see. Farmer 2729 asks, "Hi, how do you figure out something if the playtesters didn't complain about it?" Well, I think that's part of like building that inverse conveyance skill. I talk a little bit more about that in part 3 of the course, but as like a quick answer to this, I guess, you have to develop the ability in your own self to recognize what the game is actually like and recognize like how you feel when you play it, right? Now, obviously you're extremely familiar with the game, and so problems that come from lack of familiarity with how the design works are hard to see unless playtesters have a problem with it or complain about it. Now, that's why the video feedback, like just watching people play the game, they just record themselves while they're playing, is really important, because oftentimes they won't complain, they won't say anything, and they don't even know that something's wrong to say anything, right? They're just like, this is what the game is like. Um, you know, famously the Joseph Anderson video about The Witness, where he complains about why does the game introduce the polyomino puzzles, uh, not to use the trademarked term, and get the lawyers on me, but why does the game introduce the polyomino puzzles mechanic with this really hard puzzle that has these two L blocks, and I was stuck on it, or maybe it's an S and L, I can't remember, but like, why does it introduce that that way? So it's like, oftentimes players think their experience with the game is how it's supposed to go, right? And so they might not understand that something went wrong, right? So that's why video is really important there. Okay, null x exception says, how do you make mechanics that synergize together and produce fun, and not just making synergies for the sake of it? Well, maybe that's something that like I'm not quite covering in there super well. I guess I took it for granted that you are trying to
I
make
didn't watch
something
that
that
video, but I
produces
guess he's
something that's
talking about the
interesting,
bridge.
that
Did
comes
he
out
go to the
of
bridge
the, let's say,
controls
synergy, which is
by
not really the
walking
word that I
around
used,
the
but
tutorial
the
puzzles?
things work well together, right? Part of them working well together is that interesting and surprising emergent properties come out of those things working together. You know, that's a point in John's little alongside the
The entrance to the quarry.
stream
Okay.
discussion there, which I may have to splice in. That's
Well,
another point where
okay,
I'm
wait.
targeting lower intermediate, right?
You're
It's
telling
like,
me
it's not the only thing that you can do
he
to make
said
things
that
totally
criticism.
orthogonal. It's just like it's a good starting
He said
point,
that
right?
criticism, but didn't play the game long enough to understand what
But
that was,
oftentimes,
and
like if
still
you
made an
make
hour video
mechanics
about it or
that don't
whatever.
conflict, like they don't care
Really?
about the same thing, they're not,
Okay.
you know, they're not looking at this same thing and modifying it in the same way, then it's easy to combine those together and you will just get some emergent properties out of that that are not the same as each of those things on their own. Right?
I mean, that's
But
far
yeah,
from the
the
first
point is that you don't want to just
instance of
have
that technique in the
thing
game,
A
right?
plus thing B. You
Like
want there
you've
to be
seen that
some kind of
technique 2 or
interaction
3
between
times
those where
before
they
you even could get
multiply
to the
and they
quarry.
produce new things, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
it's
know
totally
that answers the
intentional.
question of how you do that, other than it's just a property that you should be evaluating when you add things to the game and seeing whether or not it's producing things, right? If it's not producing stuff when you interact, when you put it in there with other things, it really depends on like how good is that thing on its own, right? Certainly there's things in Taiji that I don't have interact with other stuff. You know, I don't have like tree puzzles plus dice symbols or whatever, right? But it's still okay and it's worth having that thing in the game, even though like it didn't interact very deeply with that. Or, you know, some of those I didn't try very hard to like make it interact, but like oftentimes if it didn't occur to me that like, oh, this thing could interact with this thing in some interesting way, then maybe it's already past the point of where I'm looking. Like I didn't have to look that hard for the things that were in the game, right? Like even the tree stuff, it was like that, it was just an idea that occurred to me when I went to the cloisters, the Met cloisters in New York City. And I saw this espalier trees that they had there, and it just popped into my head the idea of like, oh, you could make puzzles out of this, because like I'd never seen that before. And so I saw those weird trees, and I thought, oh, this is a very weird and artificial structure for a tree, and this is like a way to connect the concept of trees to this very rigid and artificial puzzle thing, right? And so then the whole idea for that area sort of came out of that. But my point is like there was like serendipity that caused some of those ideas to pop into my head, and then there was also like really obvious interactions
I'm
that
gonna get another drink. I'll be back in a second.
apparent that were going to happen, and I didn't have to start being like, oh, I really need to dig to get something interesting. Like I could have maybe made a little bit of a bigger game, a slightly bigger game, if I started really digging for extra stuff, but I felt like I had enough stuff. There was more stuff than I expected that I would find there. Okay. Robotic Fox asks, in cases where the cost of annoyance is worth what the game gets out of it, how do you convince the player to put up with it? Oh God. How do you convince the player to put up with the annoyance? I don't know, because I haven't tried to design for that. You know, the thing that's popping into my head right now is like Space Giraffe, which is a game that's kind of like that. Or like, well, I did mention Getting Over It, right? Which I haven't played, but you know, it's a very popular game that I recognize is a sort of annoying challenge to play, right? But I think people like inherently understand in that kind of game that that's just like part of the core challenge of the game, right? So I think you just have to like show what's interesting about your game, right? You have to get to the good part quickly. You have to get to the interesting thing that's worth it as quickly as you possibly can, and don't faff around with a bunch of stuff where the puzzle or whatever, right? The thing that I'm getting is not really worth the annoyance, right? I need to be seeing that, oh, right, there's this thing about it, right? Now past that, I don't know, other than you're going to have to build a lot of trust with players. You know, you're going to have to like be somebody who's had a career of making games that are great, and then people are willing to maybe stick with the thing longer even though it's annoying, right? um you know, this is like, I can't make Inland Empire, but David Lynch can make Inland Empire, right? It's like you have to be maybe at a certain point that where the audience has already bought into the thing enough to be like, okay, I'm gonna stick with it. Or uh, Hideo Kojima can make Death Stranding, but I can't make Death Stranding, right? Because I'm already bought in. I'm already signing up for whatever bullshit this is gonna be because I just already love Kojima's games, right? So I want to like see what's there, and so then I will put up with the like, okay, this game kind of has a slow start and whatever, right? Um, because it's like I assume it's gonna be worth it, right? Maybe it isn't in the end, right? Maybe I decide he's all washed up. It's his glory days are past, but like that's kind of the only way I can see to do that. If it's like your first game, I don't know. Like I said, unless it's obviously a game where you're wrestling with something and that's the point. The examples that I talked about in the course were more like it was an unfortunate side effect of the mechanics of the game. It's like the point, I feel like the point of a little perspective is not to wrestle with the controls, right? It's like that there's something about this perspective thing that's interesting, but it's just like in the time that I played the game, I was wrestling with the controls the whole time on multiple levels. Um, by which I don't mean multiple levels of the game, but multiple levels of abstraction. Uh, and I just didn't see anything that was that interesting other than like I get constantly annoyed because I was going to try to do this and now I'm like stuck because of something that I couldn't have possibly seen ahead of time. So it's more like the emergent surprise of that game is a negative experience for the player, not a positive experience. I'm not surprised by the things that I can do in the game. I'm surprised by the things that I can't do in the game. Anyway, okay. Uh we've got, I guess we're about halfway through. We got like another 30 minutes of time, and questions have started coming in, so that's good. All right, so Saint Chapulus, longtime viewer, asks a question on issue triage. Game needs releasing, real artists ship, but some issues don't resolve cleanly, with the problem being shifted from domain to domain. For example, how complex mechanics UI is to learn versus execute, where you can get one or the other.
I don't
What?
understand this question
I
at all.
have this issue in project, etc. Seems like a big topic worthy of its own talk. Maybe you have something to say now. I'm not quite sure I understand what you're saying. Oh, okay. So you mean that, okay. You mean that you have a deadline to ship the game and you're unable to fix the issue and the deadline is approaching?
Then it sucks to be you. What do you want to know about that?
I'm not sure. This is another one that I'm gonna punt on. If you want to clarify, then I'll come back to it. Actually, I got to take a real quick bathroom break, and then I will be back. So to collect more of your questions and answer them. So I'll try to make it quick.
Invent a time machine. That's not a bad tactic. This is really the same point. Did someone say Braid Tactics? I don't. So Braid Tactics was never quite a good enough game that I would really consider picking it up and working on it again. I do think about it once in a while, but I think about it in terms of like, how do I, because it was sort of like a game design research problem that was a little bit interesting, but never solved all its problems. And so I think about it once in a while of like, how would I make that work?
All right.
But you know, I don't think about it too hard
Let's see.
for too long.
Let me grab some more questions and paste them in here. Obviously, if we ran out of questions, then I would end early. If we don't run out of questions, but we hit time, then I'm just gonna end. And if there's questions there, I will look through them, and if there's some that are particularly good, then I may be. Oops, I failed to copy Valigo's name. Whoops. Sorry, this happens sometimes. I'm copying stuff over and I'm not thinking, and I fail to copy it over. Okay. Let's see, where were we? Oh gosh, more. Okay. All right, late stage username. Again, if I miss your question, feel free to repost it. Sometimes I'm gonna miss these things because it's just stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Okay. Late stage username asks, how do you deal with setting the quality bar too high in the start of your game and not having resources to execute on the rest of it? So I guess you mean like you make a vertical slice or something. I'm not sure what you mean exactly by setting the quality bar too high. Because then that's like presuming that you have a large game and you've chosen a level of fidelity to execute at, and you've set that quality, that fidelity too high. You should always try to set the bar for what you're executing on within the realm of feasibility considering your budget, right? I do think there's a lot that you can do there, right? It's easier to do things now if you don't mind using library assets and things like that. If you're trying to like not do that, then it does get much more expensive, because certainly stuff like art is very high. But I'm not exactly sure what you mean by setting the quality bar too high, because if you mean in terms of the design, I mean, okay, broadly on this point, and this maybe goes a little bit into answering Chapulis's question as well. My experience is very unusual in that I make games primarily alone. I primarily make games by myself, which means that my budget is pretty low. And I also happen to live out in the middle of nowhere. Luckily, there's Starlink now, so I'm capable of doing something like this without too many technical problems. In fact, there's like an inch of snow outside, so the fact that this is all working, it's should be surprising at all. But my point is that having a very low budget, like burn rate, like how much money does it cost for you to work on the game for a year, gives you a lot more leeway in terms of how high you can set the quality bar, right? Because you're just spending more time on it, right? With that said, having more budget and having more people also is a force multiplier. I certainly, I mean that's obviously true, but I've also seen that like when I was working with Gregory doing the soundtrack, right? The soundtrack for Taiji is something that I'm super proud of. I think it's an amazing part of the game, and it was just, you know, the soundtrack prior to Gregory working on the game was sort of an afterthought. There was like, it was okay. I was reasonably happy with the music in the game, but there wasn't very much of it, and I had not prior to that put the energy into it that other parts of the game had. There was not an attempt to like incorporate thematic elements of the overall game design into the music up until that point. And so it was this huge force multiplier to have somebody else that like they can take that on, and that's the thing that they're thinking about 24/7, right? Um, so you can get a lot from that, even though it's obviously it's much more expensive to have somebody else that you're also having to pay to work on the game, right? Okay. Secret Google Spy. Okay, that was the indie versus finding work in industry question. Okay, so they said, thank you for your previous answer. Do you have some specific skill which you figured out on how to predictably train? If so, what's the Rocky routine? Predictably train? Uh, I mean, everything in making video games is kind of like anything else. You just have to like do it to get better at it. So, um, the more you do it, the more you get better at it. As far as like specifics of puzzle game design and puzzle design, those are coming in the next two parts of the course. So, as much advice as I can give anybody on that kind of stuff will be there. So I don't, I don't think I can say it better here, other than just to say that like you make games, you do things, you want to get better at art, you do art, you'll get better, right? Okay. Valago asks, what do you think about puzzles that make you use something you saw some time ago? Survival horrors have it a lot. You see some magic symbol, and in 40 minutes, you need to match it with something. Do you think it's enough to demand from player to pen and paper it, or is it worth it to build an in-game immersive way to keep this info within context, even though it might take some effort? Or maybe it's better to not have these at all. In other words, am I okay with breaking the fourth wall, requiring people to screenshot or pen and paper the thing, or I must maintain immersion? Um, this is a question that's a little bit too specific in its example. That specific example in a lot of survival horror games where it's like you see something and then 40 minutes later you have to do this, and maybe you forgot to write it down or you didn't realize it was important. And so there's like some genre convention in an adventure game that you should just write everything down. I think that's generally bad design. You shouldn't like rely on genre convention that somebody would know that they should screenshot it or write it down, right? So that thing, if it's required for a puzzle, should be relatively easy to go re-access or re-access, if you need that information, right? Whether that's for a particular game, or the requirement or the best way to do it is put it into a menu in the game that automatically keeps track of anything that you might have found that's a hint, or whether it's best to do it some other way. I don't know. Like, for example, the way that The Witness does this is when it gives you these things, they're written down on a piece of paper in the game, which is a pretty big hint that maybe you should write it down on a piece of paper. But it still has the benefit of that it's relatively easy to go access those things again, right? You don't have to. It's not like,
It's
oh,
true
you went past
by
some point
design.
of no return and you didn't write it down. Like you definitely don't want to do things like that. So, hopefully that answers the question. I definitely don't think it's a problem for people to write things down or screenshot it. Like I'm not. I don't even think that breaks immersion. So, anyway, let's see. Ois in
How do you
car.
maintain detail using
I'm
vertex
not sure
painting?
how to
I mean, a
pronounce that.
modern game has a
Ois
lot
in
of
car
vertices. It's not a problem.
asks, when showcasing early versions of puzzle games, have you noticed people approaching things differently? Gore? Maybe that was a typo. Uh, e.g., okay. For example, I found people are more likely to assume things are broken or unsolvable rather than work hard to find a solution. Oh,
That's true.
well, it's certainly true that in any kind of puzzle game, if a thing is if there's stuff that's broken in the game, the player is that's going to infect the rest of the game, and the player is never going to be sure whether or not this is a weird puzzle or is the game broken, right? And if your game's weird enough, people are going to think that anyway. So I just wouldn't worry about that too much, but just try to make sure that things aren't broken. Um, and try to like not put those kind of things that are that weird too close to the beginning of the game, because you need to build player trust to be able to pull off weird things where there's some odd part of the thing where, oh, you have to like be standing in a specific spot to actually see that. Oh, camera's covering questions now. Yeah, I can move up here. Okay. Or I can scroll it up. Would you rather me scroll it up? I guess I'll scroll it up and put myself down here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we're getting to where we should be winding down, but we do have a little bit more time. Okay, I think that's in relation to Chipolis's thing. There's something here Robotic Fox is saying that's like none of your other ideas are as high quality as where the game starts. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to address that or not.
YouTube changed their interface again. It's even more
Sorry, I'm
for babies now.
trying to grab
the
questions real quick.
Why do they keep doing this?
This is not a question, but there's a paragraph here. I will read this in case it's worth addressing, but it's not actually a question, so. We're gonna get down into covering the thing again, so. Okay. I think we're getting a little long in the tooth with some of these questions anyway. Let's see. Okay, so I think if I'm wrong, then correct me, Dandy, but I think this was related to Chipolis's question. I'm not really sure what this is related to. But anyway, Danny McGee says, I think they're talking about, for example, hotkeys versus file menu, where you can make something less discoverable, less/discoverable to harder to learn.
Yeah, that whole discussion, I don't understand what's happening.
I'm not sure what you mean there. I memorized that increases complex UI mechanic. There was a complex UI mechanic. Yeah, okay, it was the Chipolis thing here, right? Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to read this. This seems probably like I don't have to address it, but in my opinion, the answer is to have both things, UI button and a hotkey, whether the equivalent is for the game mechanic or similar thing. Having a okay, I'm just gonna leave that. I don't know. Chipolis was already like, we can talk about this later, and I didn't understand the question, so. Okay, Kube Runs asks, when a playtester reports a problem, how often do you discuss potential fixes with them? In a more general sense, when talking to playtesters, do you worry about finding
if they're
a
a
solution too
designer
quickly
or
in
not.
response to a poor experience? I don't know that I unless I'm absolutely sure that I have no idea what to do, I usually won't discuss it with them. Like, I don't think that it's like, if they're another game designer, it can be useful to discuss potential fixes, but oftentimes other game designers will already have told me something that they think might work, so I don't really have to ask them their opinion unless I have a different idea, and then I want to like run that past them or something. Do I worry about finding a solution too quickly? I don't really worry about it, other than I would say that you shouldn't try to find a solution too quickly. You shouldn't, as John was saying in his live streaming reaction, you shouldn't you shouldn't overreact to a playtest, right? Like, don't knee jerk and like, oh, I need to change this, right? But no, like, if it's possible that you try something you think is going to fix the problem and it doesn't work, but that's going to get like ironed out with more rounds of playtesting. So, okay. Have I ever played the turn-based strategy game Advanced Wars? I played Advance Wars, the one on the Game Boy Advance. I don't know if that's what you mean. I think this game combines aspects of chess with the economy of StarCraft. I think this genre is longing for an actual competitive game that isn't just a rehashing of Advance Wars. Okay, that wasn't exactly a question other than have I played Advance Wars, which I guess I have. It was a long time ago. Um. Oh, I didn't even write down who asked that. I'm sorry. It was Wilkie B. Although it's probably not going to be in the video because it wasn't exactly a question other than a yes or no. I don't have a lot of opinions about that kind of game other than I've never really liked one. I'm going to give Mugenics a shot, and if I don't like that one, then that will be me writing off the genre of like that kind of game, turn-based strategy games. Okay. This is not really a question, but I just wanted to read it and see whether there was anything that it would spawn in my mind. So Danny McGee said, oh, this was related to right. This was related to the thing about notes that you write down, right? Witness does this, and I think the main reason for it is to indicate to the player clearly there's something not yet discovered hiding somewhere in the world. I think it's probably okay when it has a purpose like that, but if the game is just doing it for no good reason, it's quite bad. Personally, I'd prefer if the game remembered the symbol for me in some sort of scrapbook, which many games do. Yeah, there are a lot of games that do that, and so like I said, it depends, right? If I mean, I'm just reiterating what I said earlier, but like if it's hard or impossible for the player to get back to the thing that they were supposed to have written down, and you want to.
Here's what I'll say about this. Whenever I play a puzzle game and I start playing it and it's like, here's a here's a diagram that's the solution to something you have to input somewhere else, or like, here's the code to the locker or whatever, here's the secret word and it's written on the wall, I almost immediately write off that puzzle game as not having any good ideas and not being a real puzzle game. Like almost always. Now, this was brought up in the context of survival horror games. Um, Maybe they're trying to have a puzzle so that the gameplay doesn't get too monotonous or whatever. But whenever I see that, I think, oh, this is a fake puzzle, right? Because it almost always is a fake puzzle.
Wizard spellcasting game. So there was like you climbed to the top of the mountain and you saw a path that you took to get up there, and if you drew over that path, then you would learn a new spell that you had not learned from your spell book, right? And like that was a cool part about about the game, but the wizard spellcasting part about the game didn't work. So the entirety of the rest of the game of the Witness is sort of an excuse for you to be drawing lines so that you can do this cool environmental puzzle secret lines thing.
Spoilers.
So that idea seems inadvisable to pursue because when you are going to be making this complex 3D game uh, with a detailed environment and all that, it just seems like that's going to be a bad experience because it's either going to be really shallow because there's going to be like two of these things in the game, or what the game is really trying to do is go all the way with it, where it's like anytime you see a circle, it's gonna be something that you can draw, right? That seems totally inadvisable because it's like there's no way that you're not gonna like miss somewhere on this island where you can stand here and you can look in this direction, you can see a thing and it looks like it should be part of one of these puzzles, but it isn't, right? That's just an insane amount of effort to iron out all of those issues in order to make that a good game, right? And of course, when you play the final game, that's totally invisible, right? You don't think about it, right? It's just, this is just how the game is, right? But it's extremely difficult to make that work. And so if somebody was telling me, oh, I think I'm going to make a game like this, I'd be like, okay, good luck, right?
True. True. But that's also, you know,
That seems like a dangerous idea to pursue, right? So
Well, there's more to talk
That
about there,
level
but
of like
yeah.
effort that's involved in making the design work and making the game good and not be a bad experience is something that generally is inadvisable, right? That I'm advising against it generally. Now, of course, if you are an experienced upper intermediate designer, then you can feel free to disregard that advice. You already know what you're getting into when you're going down that route. Now, sometimes I think the way you can go down those routes is that you just are a little
Why
bit
did I do it
naive
for the
going into
movies and
it
the
and you think
witness?
it's going
I
to
don't
be
know what you
easier
mean
than it
by
is,
it.
right?
Oh, you
In
mean
fact,
the
most of the time that's how these things probably happen is you're just a little bit naive.
the
But
codes?
all the same, it's like
It's a long
it's both
discussion.
inadvisable,
Let's
but it
not
can
talk over this
work,
with that.
right? Okay. Oops, I cut off the names again. We gotta have the names or else I'm not gonna be able to put them in the video. Okay. All right, Bortus97 asked, why did I cut the aboutness from the course? Well, that applies to the next part of the course. But the reason I cut it was because it was a weird word that I felt like I was spending too much time trying to define the word, and I don't even really use it. So why am I defining a
It's
terminology
a
that I
good
don't
point.
really use
Good
when I
piece
can
of
just kind of say
introspection.
all the things that I want to say without saying, oh, here's this term that means the thing. It's like I can just talk about the other thing. So that's what happened. That
Good general
the
advice.
content is all in there. It's just I took the word out. Okay. Pale Blue Zebra asks, and this is
Yeah, we could
probably a
talk
final
about it
question.
sometime. I think
Yes,
it's
this is
a
the final
longer
question. So
discussion
Pale Blue Zebra
because there's
asks,
lots of elements
what's your
that go
opinion
into
on
that
procedurally
decision.
generated puzzles versus handcrafted? Okay. Well, I'm generally of the camp that I don't think that procedurally generated games are overall a good idea. I've seen some exceptions. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but most of the time, procedural generation produces slop. It doesn't produce really interesting designs, right? Uh, an example of where this does work is Spelunky, and the reason it works well in Spelunky is because the level designs are not the point of the game, right? The point of the game becomes sort of this meta strategy level game thing where like you have to kind of prepare yourself for an unexpected thing that you don't really know, right? Um, and so if you're making strategy games that are like at a next level of abstraction over the details of like individual level designs or individual puzzle designs, then maybe that's a good way to do it. Um, is to try to procedurally generate them. As long as they're like reasonably okay, then that's probably fine. But it's because the focus of the game is now up here and not down here. But like if the focus of your game is like, I want to have a game that has really interesting puzzles and I want the player to have like a good experience with the game, uh, and respect their time and all that, then like procedurally generating the puzzles maybe not the best idea. With that said, Marcos Don Anthony does really interesting work in this space. So he spends a lot of time specifically working on trying to make procedurally generated puzzle games and is probably putting more work into that than I've seen anybody else do. So I do keep an eye on what Marcos is doing, but I don't know whether or not I think that you're always going to end up with like a worse game, at least on that metric, right? Like I said, if you're doing it up here, if you're like, okay, it's a run based game and you're supposed to do a lot of different runs and whatever, then maybe like it could work in some way. But it's just not the kind of thing that I am interested in when I play a puzzle game. So I'm very interested in a very tightly crafted and polished kind of line of communication of ideas that progress through the game. And that's probably not going to happen based on an algorithm, at least anytime soon. Okay, so that was the last question, but we got one more question, and I will end there. Okay. Actually, this was. Why do I always leave that off? I don't know why. Okay. Danny McGee asks, if you have a hidden mechanic in your game, like the way you use an item that isn't obvious and makes it more powerful, should you and how do you introduce that to the player? For example, Animal Well lets you ride the frisbee, but it never tells you this. And it lets you shoot bubbles straight down with the bubble wand. Sometimes these are even required to be puzzles, but the player has no idea they're possible or exist. Well, maybe I will cut this question because I don't really know how to answer this question. If it's a hidden mechanic, then you're not really introducing it to the player. Like that's sort of inherent in that it's hidden. Um, but you can certainly in that type of situation you can make
Animal Well tutorializes
you can
the
make a
frisbee.
challenge that requires the player to discover the thing.
There's a very specific screen in Animal Well
and you
that
can
the
limit
point
the
of
other
which is to get you to ride the frisbee.
And that will certainly funnel them towards
I don't remember about the
but
bubbles,
like anytime,
but with the frisbee,
that's
is
just the
definitely
general
true.
thing, right? If there's stuff in your game that you want the player to discover, there's like certain things you can do to make that more likely, right? If you can limit the possibilities of things that the player can do other than the thing that they're supposed to do, then that's one way to do it. You can certainly make it to where players don't have to discover the thing at all to get through the game. That's one way to approach it, but
is in the trailer maybe, but
yeah,
I didn't watch the trailer, I don't think.
Generally, if people are playing the game, especially if they get into the middle part of a game, they're usually invested enough that
it's easier to accidentally discover.
with, like, experimenting.
No, I'm not saying accidentally discover. I'm saying there is a screen that is designed to make you jump on the frisbee.
Pattern of that, so you sort of as
I remember. I don't remember the details of it, but I remember playing it, and I'm like, oh,
surprised that maybe there's something you can do with a tool that you have in the game that you haven't discovered yet, and maybe it's worth experimenting further with it, right? Okay, so that is the end of the Q&A. Thanks everybody for hanging out. The next part of the course will be premiering next Saturday, so that's just for you guys. Probably, well, it might go in the. If you're watching the video archive of this, the next thing will have already probably premiered. Well, I might get it out before then, but anyway, so it'll be next Saturday, same time. The next one is longer, so bear that in mind. The next one's an hour and 30 minutes. It is the longest part of the course. It's the second part, but
maybe we'll make some popcorn.
Hopefully you'll all turn up, and if you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel,
yeah, like and subscribe to the thing.
Let me link it. I think this will work. Will this work? Does this work? Okay, it doesn't work anymore. Here we go. It works this way now. If you subscribe, then you'll at least see the video when it goes up. I should have a pre thing where you can do the notifications and get a notification for it.
I typed that correctly.
Apparently it's just as bad as Twitch notifications, according to somebody. So I'll try to be a little bit more Johnny on the spot with the like Twitter notifications and whatever, which you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm the same thing. There should be, if you scroll down, you should have links to all that. So thanks again. This all has went really well. We got more questions
except for the audio delay,
and I hope you'll all look forward to the next parts of the course. I will say that I think it gets better as it goes on. So the second part's better than the first part, and the third part is better than the second part. So I will see you around. My voice is getting exhausted. So
yeah. All right. It's been a long time. I'm going to do the rest of my little comments here, but we'll do them fast. So we left off here. Okay. So this was what I thought was one of the most important parts of that talk, by the way. Because he was talking about like, oh, in the early game, the controls were not that good and stuff. And what I was saying when I was talking over it during the talk was just every game has some version of this problem. And The difference is that some people notice the problem and take it seriously, and other people don't because they just don't want to believe it's a problem, or they don't want to do more work, or it just doesn't correspond to their original vision to change the way such and such works or whatever, right? And so um, here's the thing about this is when your game feel is bad, or when the interactivity is bad or something, you'll probably have reasons why that's the case and why you can't change it, right? Oh, I can't change this because part of the point of the game is blah, blah, blah. And like sometimes those are good reasons, but a lot of the time it's just you being inflexible and not listening to what the game is trying to tell you about what's better. All right. Like your goal when you start making a game, when you start a prototype, um, your goal is to follow, your goal is to use the prototype to navigate the space of possible games to learn how to get to the good space, right? And so when you start out and when you so first of all, when you start out, if you have bad game feel, that's not a surprise at all. That's just what's going to happen unless you're very, very experienced or you're making something that's a clone of a genre that's very well understood, right? But again, you'll have excuses that you call reasons for why the game feel is bad. And this is kind of where we separate the pros from the wannabes is like, how do you respond to this? Right? What do you do when you implement your game and it kind of sucks? Right? And many, many people just say, well, it has to, it's actually good. It doesn't kind of suck. It's actually good because X, Y, and Z. And that's usually not true. So you, in order to fix your game feel that you see in your early prototypes, there's a psychological battle that you have to wage within yourself that many people fail. Okay. That's one of the most important things to understand about game design. And it's, you won't hear it discussed very often because people who have solved this problem solved it long enough ago that they just even forgot that this was a thing, probably. Right. Okay. Why people were asking, hey, do you want to do a pair thing, or like, why don't you do videos about game design? So I've been working on a game for a really long time, right? And I think the value of a design video is much higher if people can actually play the game and know what I'm talking about, right? Like, oh, because I played the thing, I understand what he's saying when, etc. And I just haven't released a new game in a long time. And so I think that after this game comes out, I might do more talks and stuff about design. That said, I am a little bit frustrated in it's actually heartening to see, videos like what we watched that refer to some of the talks I did, because I mean, to be quite honest, for the most part, I feel like I spent all this time doing all these talks and I was just kind of shouting into the void and nobody cares. Because most games that are made, they just make they just make fundamental mistakes that are so much more basic even than what you try to discuss in these talks, right? And so it, I feel like kind of nobody even cares. Forget about my talks that I did. Nobody even really cares about the craft of game design very much anymore, is how I feel about it. And so I feel like it's much more effective to make games than it is to talk about designing games, just because like if you make a game and the design is good in a readable fashion, the people who have the eyes to see will see. Like that's how I learned game design, is by playing video games, right? And so maybe that's, I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I feel like a lot of it was a waste of time. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't, but you know, um so that's the answer to that question. We'll see how I feel about it after this game is out. I feel like I would much rather do something more like what Matthew just did there, like rather than going to a conference, on specific timing and doing a thing, just like giving a pre-prepared talk like that is better in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, dude, sometimes conferences are great, but sometimes they're just like using you in a really bad way. I don't know. It's kind of sucks. Okay, so he talked about video playtesting and just recording something. I think that's, yeah, it's super useful. One thing that I'll say about that is it's kind of a modern version of what I used to do anyway, because like what I used to do before we had, you know, the easy ability to record your desktop and live stream and all this. Um, I used to just set people up in a room, like during the early days of Braid or The Witness. I would just give them a build of the game and they would just sit there and play, and I would just not say anything and watch them. And that does affect the play session a little bit, but not as much. Like your natural inclination would be to talk to them the whole time and all that, but it really changes the play experience to do that. And so, um, a lot of the time I would even just leave the room for like half an hour and then come back and see where they are and stuff. And just when there's a video recording in the background, it's a much more automatic and detailed version of that. And so it is really useful. I mean, people are still, they're not quite going to behave as if they would if they weren't recording, but it's still really good. And like you said, it's a good reality check. So if you can do this, like not everyone is technically savvy enough to set this up, but maybe you set it up for them, or maybe, maybe you just have game designers uh playtest your game first, right? And then they can just sort of do that. Um, the last thing I'm going to say, he brought up this Metroiding thing. I actually didn't know it was called that. I have played very little in the way of official Metroid games. I played the original one a little bit back when it came out at my friend's house who had a Nintendo. I did not have a Nintendo. And I probably played it a little bit, you know, 10 years ago or something again. Um, but I don't think even original Metroid does this, right? Is this like a Metroid Prime thing or something? I never played that. But at least I don't remember it if original Metroid does it. But what I will say about this is I don't like it for two reasons, right? One is a feel reason. It's like a lot of the time what this turns into in reality is that you don't trust the player and you're treating them as a low attention span person and you're trying to like grab their attention at the beginning in a kind of a cheap way in some ways. Um, I forget what the name of the game is that put me off this, but what's the game where you're like this dude who's like uh possessed by some evil black goopy tentacle stuff and you're in New York or whatever game that was does this. Um, and Prototype, yeah, that sounds familiar. Um, I think it was Prototype. It does this in a really extreme way, and I didn't like it comes off wrong, but the secondary reason why I don't like this, and this is a more objective reason, is just that games have all these mechanics and verbs and all this stuff that you like learn how to do, right? And it's structurally terrible to throw all of that at somebody at the beginning because you're not able to pace it out. And so they suck at all these mechanics. And so you're trying to give them a good gameplay experience because you're giving them all the things that they will be able to utilize eventually, all the tools in the toolbox, but they don't know how to use the tools in the toolbox, and they don't know all the button combos and all these things. And so it's like it tends to be a frustrating flaily play experience. And then you finally start to get used to it, and then they take it all away from you and you won't see that stuff for like 10 hours or whatever. It's like it's structure, and that's bad because you just spent all this time tutorializing somebody on something that now they won't do, and then you'll re-tutorialize later. It's just really confused and messed up. I do think if you wanted to do this, so the reason he brought this up in the talk is because there is the opposite problem too. There's the problem that your game starts too slow. And I think there are more natural solutions to the problem. Just like he said with storytelling, just start people a little later. Give them the first ability. Like, don't just put, yeah, like the initial playtest of Fez back when we were funding Fez was like this too. It was like, hey, we started making some levels, and the levels were literally like pushing crates to get up on the ledge, like every game. Even back in the Fez days, this was already super tired, and it's like, dude, just get to the Fez, right? So like just starting people later, you don't have to treat everybody like they're stupid, right? Um, it's not necessary. There's this, in a way, that people are too worried about whether people like them or not, and they'll end up ruining their personality trying to look good to people. There's a game design version of that, right? So just start people, give them the first ability, and if the first ability isn't interesting by itself, either pick a different one first, or why is it in the game anyway, right? I mean, maybe if it combos really well with everything else, but then you would know not to give that to people first if it doesn't have its own thing. So I just think there's more natural solutions to that treat your players with respect eventually. We funded Fez for a while, and then we stopped funding Fez, and then somebody else did completion funding for Fez. Yeah. Okay, that's basically all the thoughts that I have about this. We will tune in next week, schedule permitting, and we'll see part 2. The Metroiding thing was a bit of a rough point. I think that it's a useful point. I mean, the problem that you have, right, is that all of these are potentially deep topics, and in order to have a 1-hour video, you just have to not rabbit hole on every single one of these, right? Like this is easily a 2-hour talk by itself of like, let's look at different games that did this, and how did they do it, and how were those different from each other, and like, what are these, like, in even that thing that I said over the course of 3 minutes about what are the structural problems, you could go in, if you actually want people to absorb the information, you want to give them a really good example. So I would pick a game like Prototype, and I would list all the controls for all the different powers and all that, right? And like, of course, you're not going to go into that kind of detail in a 1-hour talk. So this is just, I mean, game design is really, really, really deep, and all of these are potential really huge discussions. Should be a 500-hour course. I mean, if you guys want to fund him on Substack, maybe he could do episodes. Just an idea. Works for Casey. The question is really, what do you think of Game X? Yeah. I just don't. See, here's the thing. I don't like that question. I don't like to be asked, what do I think of Game X? Because again, I mean, there's multiple reasons. I mean, one, it puts all the onus for actual thinking on me. Like the questioner didn't ask anything more specific or interesting about Game X, right? They just, like, what do you want to know about the game? Do you want to ask about some system and about what you perceive about it and what I think about that, right? Or are you just, you just trying to do cheap internet, oh, so and so said something good about the thing I like or something bad. Okay, so one of the memories, this is actually a dark memory for me. It really bothers me. and you could probably find this YouTube video. Okay. He mentioned David Lynch in the talk today, and maybe that's also what surfaced this, but there was some clip I saw. It was just like David Lynch during an interview somewhere. And somebody asked him, who are your favorite directors? Right. And the first thing he says is, well, I don't like most modern directors, and that part's fine. But then he says, like, oh, I like Paul Thomas Anderson, right? And a bunch of people go, ooh. And it's like, oh, he liked my thing that I like or whatever. And there's just something really gross about that. Like, I don't like, there's something about that that's like 28 days later and like a bunch of people being zombies in their psychology. It's actually kind of dark if you follow it all the way down. And those questions feel to me like that. They're trying to 28 days later the situation. Shared cultural moments are cool though, right? But like, you know, he's seen, it's not shared cultural moment. It's him validating your thing. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just a weird quirk of my personality that I find that really gross, but I do. It like really bothers me. Like if you're friend and you like the same thing, that's great and you want to talk about it and whatever, but like when it's seeking validation from like a public figure, it's really weird. What questions did you play Advance Wars one? Someone was just referring to the general form of question of what did you think about Game X in the chat. That's maybe they were referring to the Advance Wars one. I don't know. All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to sign off because I've also been streaming a long time. So, um, we're just going to sign off. We're not going to try to raid anybody. We might stream again later tonight. We have some games to play. We learned that we have never played this, I guess, which is weird. Maybe somebody gave me the code and it wasn't out yet and I forgot that I put in the code. Like, I don't know. Or maybe we played this and forgot. I just didn't recognize it from the screenshot. So we might stream later tonight. We have this. We have a couple other games that we downloaded. Could raid Steven. Steven who? Is Steven Lavelle? What's his Twitch name? I don't even remember. Steven Stevenson. Is it Increpar? Is he streaming? How do you pronounce Increpar? Oh, he's okay. He's streaming that game. All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for attending the game. We can take back the culture of understanding games and learning about them from whoever has it right now. Apparently nobody. All right. Thanks everyone.